Hello and welcome to Network Insights. This series does exactly what it says on the tin. It's our opportunity to speak to the amazing people that make up our network and for them to share their insights in relation to the work they're doing to support people to be more physically active. Today's episode is focusing on program design, specifically to support people living with cancer to be more active. So without further ado, it's over to Elaine to introduce our very special guest.
It is an absolute delight to have with us today Professor Anna Campbell. Anna and I have known each other for quite a long period of time, and we've worked together whilst I was working at Macmillan as well. And Anna is a professor of, I've got to get your job title right, Clinical Exercise Science at Edinburgh Napier University. And what makes Anna so special, apart from just who she is the fact that she calls herself a pracademic. So she's an academic, but practically grounded in the field. So that is great for us. We love hearing that. So welcome, Anna. It's good to speak to you.
Lovely to see you both and hear for everybody else that's maybe on listening to this podcast. It's great to be here.
Great. Well, I know that your background and how you ended up working this area is really fascinating. So will we kick off with you just telling us a little bit about your background and
Sure.
how you found yourself in this area?
Absolutely. So I am, my background is kind of basic science in the degree at Glasgow University in immunology. And then I did a PhD in biochemistry. So very much lab bench based work. And then I started working in the biotech industry, and I did some work in the UK looking at different tissue medias to grow different cells. Ended up going into Holland, where I worked on some very interesting transgenic work, and came back. And when I came back from working in Holland, I decided lab work wasn't for me, but I wanted to get into something that was much more presentation, people orientated. And I had a number of options to become a patent lawyer, to get into clinical trials. But the one I chose was to become the business development manager of a company which was linked to the making of Dolly the sheep, which was the very first cloned animal in the world. So wow. Dolly and I were actually good friends. I watched her as she grew up. But yes, after a few years working there, I decided that I loved being active and I wanted to learn more about physical activity and health, not the sports side, but what being active did from a health perspective. So I took time out and did a master's in sport and exercise science, absolutely loved it. And once I'd finished, a good friend of mine, and this is about 20 years ago, told me, she said, she was a breast care nurse, and she said, I tell all my patients to stay in bed, lie there, rest when they're on chemo, and not to do anything. Is that the right thing to say, Anna? Diagnosed with cancer. And really that set me off on the journey of exploring it, looking at it from an academic perspective. But I think because of my biotech, I was a doer. I like to see things getting put into practice. And that's why, as Elaine said, I didn't want to just publish papers and just let them sit there without seeing this getting put into practice. And obviously assessing it to finding out, did it really work in the real world? So that's a little bit of my varied checkered background.
That's brilliant. 2 minutes in and I'm already like...
And you mentioned in that introduction that at the time that you started and embarked on this, the evidence was very, very few and far between in terms of supporting people with cancer. And we know that things have moved on since then. So just wondered if you could give us a little bit of background around what the evidence base is like now in terms of physical activity at different points of treatment and the benefits.
Yeah, so when I started, there was virtually nothing. Now, I had done my cardiac rehab, so as well as doing my degrees, I did my gym instructor, exercise to music, personal trainer, and the cardiac. So the cardiac rehab was really up and running. It was, the level 4 out in the community had been running for 10 or 15 years, but there was nothing at all. And when I looked in the literature then, there was virtually no papers on what happens if you stay active when you've got a cancer diagnosis at any stage of the trajectory. The first area that they researched were two big things. First of all, was it feasible to exercise while you were on treatment? Because cancer treatments can be pretty horrendous and affect you physically and psychologically. And so the main questions they asked was, did it affect somebody's quality of life if they exercised while they were on treatment or afterwards? And did it impact on one of the biggest side effects of cancer is tiredness, fatigue. So that was the big side effect that the first studies looked at. And lo and behold, they found quality of life actually improved significantly and fatigue went down. So this was the first of the studies to look at the two big side effects. Over time, it's actually developed a lot of different ways. So the major things that the evidence is really strong for now is that no matter from diagnosis really up to either survivorship phase when you're told the cancer's treatment and you're fine and to go on with your life, or if the cancer comes back and you've got advanced cancer, or if you're going through treatment, or even if you're in palliative care where it's not curative but just treatable, the evidence shows that quality of life, both physical, functional, social and emotional, are improved if you're physically active. And these are from very good high quality randomized controlled trials. The same goes for fatigue, where there's about 80 high quality trials that show that people can't really get this, that the more active you are, the less tired you get. So that message is still trying to be instilled, particularly healthcare professionals who sometimes say to me, oh no, my patients are too tired, we shouldn't be exercising them or making them active. The evidence shows the opposite. So now over time, the research has moved to much more of two ways. One is we started to look at the molecular cellular. What is it that exercise does that protects the body? Because there is now emerging evidence that suggests that if you're active after cancer diagnosis, you reduce the risk of the cancer coming back. So this is emerging evidence. There's no huge trials. But the reason why it's looking convincing is there's now evidence if you're active, you boost your immune system to kill off any raw cancer cells. You dampen down the inflammatory markers that the cancer cells thrive on. You increase your cardiorespiratory fitness and reduce your fatigue. You increase your muscle mass. So your body is much more fit for fighting any of these rogue cancerous cells that are around. So that suggests that there is really good mechanistic ways where exercise stops cancer occurring, or if you've got cancer, reduces the risk of it recurring. But also the other evidence is happening about how do we put it into practice. Craig, you were going to say something.
Yeah, just as a quick point of clarity, really, and we've had this kind of conversation and debate in the very first episode of Network Insights. We spoke with Professor Charlie Foster at the University of Bristol, and you've used a couple of key terms. I'm just curious to see what perhaps your definitions might be. So being physically active, exercising, is there a difference when we're talking about these benefits that we see? Is it being active generally, moving about day to day, going for a walk, or are we talking about something a bit more structured? Is there anything in there that you can share just to help people get an understanding?
Yes. Now, most randomized controlled trials, clinical trials, one problem is there's an inconsistency about what they give as the dose of exercise or physical activity. So we always have a problem when we try and compare trials. But the evidence suggests there's a dose response. So a little bit is better than nothing. But the higher you go in both duration and intensity, the better the effects. So being sedentary is obviously the worst case scenario, and doing some movement and active daily living does. But if you really want the best effects as far as reducing the inflammatory markers and really boosting the immune response and actually helping gain the reduce body fat, increase muscle mass, the more you do exercise, structured exercise, the more you will actually help with that. So it's a range going from little to even some people now are doing very extreme exercises, which again they can do, but probably don't get as much benefit as what we define as the current guidelines for keeping active is basically where you get the best results.
Thanks for clarifying that. And that's really great the way that you said it. And it's really important to keep that in mind. It's some is good, more is better almost. That's the chief medical office kind of strapline per se. And because it's kept at that level, it's dependent on the individual. If they're coming from a completely, let's call it inactive background, haven't been before, they may take smaller steps, but that is still more than before. And equally, if they've been active, more than before or enough might look very different. So that's great. Thank you for humouring me, let's say, on clarifying that point.
And the thing is that, I mean, the evidence now, I don't know if these stats, but anybody born after 1960 have got a 1 in 2 chance of getting cancer in their lifetime. That's the stats at the moment. So there are a lot of people who will be diagnosed with cancer, and to try and convince them of the benefits is so important. And the trials that are coming out now are actually tailoring, because cancer is about 200 different types of diseases. And each person with cancer will get very different treatments to somebody who may have the same disease and may have very different side effects. So this is where, when you're defining or designing a program for somebody with cancer, it has to be individualized. It's not like I did my cardiac rehab where we had very specific guidelines. If somebody has a triple bypass, you must make sure blood pressure is this, you must make sure something else is that, you must give them X amount of strength. It's much more difficult to do that, because for somebody, muscle wasting might be the most major side effect. For somebody else, it might be body fat gain. For somebody else, it might be bone strength. For somebody else, it could be numbness and tingling and joint pain. So everybody's quite different about what they want their activities to do to help them live a good quality life. So that's something that we've learned.
It's interesting you saying that. Obviously, as you're aware, I've had breast cancer twice now. And the one thing that helped me through was being active, because it felt like, I mean, on a psychological level, it feels like it's something you've got control over, when for the best reasons in the world, control has been taken away from you. You're in the hands of some amazing health practitioners, but they are in control of your treatment, they're in control of everything else, and you feel that you're just jumping to their tune quite frequently. So it does feel like it's something you can take control over. And the other side is, I think, for a lot of people coming out the other end of treatment, when all of that support just suddenly vanishes from you, and you're all of a sudden, you were seeing people on just about a daily basis, it felt like at some point, and then they're all gone overnight. And often, I think also the psychology of dealing with that is that people also think, well, you're treated now, you've got the all clear, well done, off you go. And they don't realize that you live with the side effects of that treatment for quite a long period of, well, your life, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm still dealing with side effects of treatment now, and physical activity is one of those things that can help you through all of that and help you support that. So it's an important part of it. Yeah.
Elaine, kind of picking up on what you've mentioned there, in your experience, it's obviously every person is unique, and the way that you may be able to kind of overcome and work through the challenges that brings is the structure of a program. So we mentioned, Anna, absolutely, each individual, the way in which we might program the activity they take part in is unique to that individual. But if we took the concept of program to a broader level, one of the benefits of a program to engage with, am I right in understanding it's that idea of there's a bit of structure, something that you can remain attached to per se and have some autonomy within? Was that a real benefit for you?
So
I think, I mean, there are different, so while we were working, Anna and I were working with Macmillan, Anna was one of our advisors. I think what we learned from that experience, and feel free to chip in, and I can talk from my own personal experience as well, was that it's horses for courses, really. Because if you have too much of a structure, there are days when you get up, and I mean, I used to get very excited if I managed to do a washing on the day, because the fatigue was just absolutely sapping. It's really hard to describe. It's like somebody has taken a syringe and sucked every bit of energy out of your cells. That's how it feels. It's really, so the fact that I'd actually succeeded in doing a washing was quite a miracle some days. And so you have to be adaptable to that, those feelings of fatigue when they hit you, and you have to roll with it. So whatever you have has got to be adaptable about this. And when you're running programs as well, if somebody actually turns up to your session, that might have been a major of achievement for them in that day. And the fact, I mean, I remember turning up for a training session. I'd cycled to the session, and I got to the session, I had nothing left in the tank, and my trainer knew what was going on, and obviously we'd worked together for a while, and all we did was do some stretching until I'd recovered, and then I was fit enough to cycle back. That's how I felt. So you've got to have that adaptability in it. So that's the first thing. I mean, I think there is something about doing it and having support of other groups. So, you know, of groups, sorry, of people who are like you. And I know that Anna's done lots of courses over the years where she set that up, so you can probably talk with more authority on that. People love, you know, the fact that they're having this shared experience, and the fact that, like, you could, if you're, for example, if you've had chemo, lost your hair, well, it doesn't matter, let's just take the wigs off for the day and just be active together in a group of people who understand what that's like. So for some people that's really important as well. So it's courses for courses. Yeah. For me, when I got cancer the first time, I was working for Macmillan. Everything in my world was surrounded by cancer. So for me, I didn't go and join a group because I wanted, physical activity for me was my time away from the disease in some ways. So everybody's slightly different. Sorry, yeah. Anna, feel free to comment on all that.
So I think you're right. For a lot of people, the group effect is a big thing. I've done lots of studies looking at that qualitative analysis. And they say it's great because they're in a safe environment and they don't need to talk about their cancer. They can have a laugh and chat, but they can share notes. And I think that just comparing with each other. But you see, there has to be a flexibility so that they must come every Monday or Wednesday. When somebody's on treatment, they're up and down as far as the fatigue levels. So one thing when I train instructors is always not to progress during treatment, because there'd be nothing worse than saying, okay, you're starting your chemo, you're going to have this for the next 6 months, and I guarantee at the end you'll be able to do X amount more. Quite the opposite. When somebody's in chemo, you're just trying to stop that functional decline, because actually if somebody does nothing during chemo, the cardiorespiratory fitness ages about 10 years. So that shows you, if you do nothing, how hard it is to pick yourself back up. Whereas if you can maintain something, and likewise muscular strength, that wasting away of the muscles happens also during treatment. So again, it's just trying to stop that decline. And in fact, the new area, which is now becoming a big thing in the United Kingdom, is prehab. So where they're trying to say to somebody, let's get you fit for surgery, so that once you've had that surgery, you'll be jumping out your bed faster than you would if you do absolutely nothing. So that's one of the areas that's really developing as well.
There's something that's real gold in there as well, and I'm sure it's in part of the kind of design elements of the prehab package, let's call it. There are different ways in which it's going around, but from a behaviour change and a sustainment of behaviour perspective, there's being fit and able to be active, lots of ables in that sentence, but more than that, it's almost the learned behaviours and the networks, and knowing where the things that you can call on are really key as well. So for those people perhaps who, for any long-term condition, cancer included, I'm sure, that idea of, I'm fit and active, I don't need to do that, that's not for me, that's for the other people. So that identity potentially isn't there to kind of pull people in, if you will, to make those preparations. So that's immediately where my mind goes when we talk about the pre-elements to it, and I think that's hugely beneficial for a number of different reasons, but that's a key one.
Well, two reasons it's beneficial is, one, when you get a diagnosis of something like cancer, the first thing people say is, right, what can I do to stop it coming back? So it's a moment, a teachable moment, where somebody might be willing to change behaviours that they've never really thought about changing. Second thing is that we now find that this is where the surgeons, the oncologists and the anaesthetists are actually saying this is going to be part of your treatment. So instead of just saying, would you like a little bit of activity? You wouldn't say that about chemotherapy. Do you fancy a little bit? But they're now seeing that this is part of their treatment and they have to help them to do it. So that is a big plus, because if you get a person that's the doctor to say this is part of your care package, people are more likely to then do it. But as Elaine said, then you need to hold their hand and help them. Because one of the biggest things that goes with cancer treatment is self-efficacy, confidence. And I've had people who are athletes who have gone through cancer treatment and are frightened to get on their bike or run, even though they did marathons, etc. They've lost all their confidence. So one of the big things is helping them to say, it's fine, you're in a safe environment, I know what to screen for, and then they can actually get their confidence. And before you know it, a lot of them are like, don't need to come back, I'm off doing what I used to do before. And just to say, Craig, about when somebody has been through cancer treatment and they've had that exercise support, if for any sad reason that the cancer comes back, I've found, because I've been working this in 20 years now, and sadly that has been the instance for some clients I've worked with, they're ready to get back into fighting the cancer by being active as much as possible when the cancer comes back. They're not afraid, whereas somebody who may not be aware of all these benefits would maybe say, oh no, I can't do anything. So it's the whole trajectory, right from diagnosis right up to secondary or advanced cancer. There are benefits for people.
Yeah, and like you're saying, that message from almost the seed point of that first conversation with your healthcare professional to be a positive one about being active.
Yeah.
So important all the way through, because we are kind of battling almost against a misconception that's a long time we've heard those messages about rest is best, and we know that it isn't in many cases. If it is something that's still heard, we certainly want to make sure that people hear that and know that it is a message to be challenged, let's say.
Yeah. Lance Armstrong, who's sadly not got the reputation he used to have, he did a lot for cancer. Not sure he did a lot for the cycling, but he did show that you could actually he was one of the first to show you could be active. And people are more and more aware with various people showing their story that you can do it. But I think it's important not that people think you have to be an athlete and push your body, that, just going for a little walk and getting some fresh air or doing very light weights is going to really give you so much more benefits than staying in your bed and just resting all the time.
Yeah. So we've alluded to a couple of points that I feel are little kind of those little gems that listeners might be listening for. So to kind of recap almost and summarize some of them, from a program design perspective, there's that broader, let's say, holistic consideration for the individual, not just the activity in isolation. You mentioned about the very broad benefits that come with it, can be physiological, psychological, so on and social even. So that's one part of it. The flexibility required within a program, drop in, drop out, not necessarily week on week incremental progressions. That's really important. Are there any other ones that you would say for somebody that's thinking we'd like to design a program in a local authority area that's connected to a prehab kind of program? What are some of those essentials that we need to be thinking about in relation to supporting people with cancer?
Yeah, and there's two things, and one is from a trial I did where what we did was we had group exercise. We made sure that it was some during the day, some in the evening, some at the weekend, so that various people, different stages of their life. After the exercise, we had a sit-down cup of tea and we looked at a behaviour change intervention. So every time we had a different topic on a rolling basis, would be, why should I exercise? What's in it for me? How much should I do? Who's going to support me? How confident am I that I can overcome any goals? What's the next step that I'm going to think about for overcoming barriers? And we did this 6 different topics on a rolling basis. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that we followed these women who had been in the middle of breast cancer 5 years later, and the women who had been given this group exercise plus the chat to help them change their behaviour were still doing about 2 hours more activity compared to the controls that didn't get that. And I believe the behaviour change component, a group kind of behaviour change component, helped them to maintain it, and the qualitative sides show that. The second thing is that sometimes, and this is one I started, and I'd obviously done the cardiac rehab where it was a very structured circuit and everybody did it. Now that's not right for everyone, and so I think you need to give options. It could be walking for some, it could be seated gentle movement for others, it could be a circuit class for others, it could be a gym-based program for some other people. Because again, men who've had prostate cancer will want to get into the gym and get those weights up. Women who've had breast cancer may just want to do something cardiorespiratory fitness to lose that excess weight. Somebody else who's got major other comorbidities and is quite feeble and weak might want to do chair-based. So I think making that one size of exercise fits all is better if there's a number of options. So that's two bits of advice.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. What about the instructors then? Because one thing that we know is it does revolve around people. You can design a program. It might be a marketing initiative that draws the appropriate audience. Then you have the design of what you're delivering, as flexible or structured as that might be. What about the role of that individual? What things have you supported with? Elaine mentioned earlier on, you've been working in this area for quite a long time. Share a little bit about that.
Sure. So when I started doing the studies, I realized that everybody said when they went to the gym and they said they had cancer, you could see the fear in the instructor's eyes because he really didn't know what to do. So I set up CanRehab, which is a training provider to help people who work with anyone with cancer, to provide them with the right information, the right screening, the right precautions, but to get them active. And it's been where they call the level 4, which is a CPD, is the main objective that we have, which is making these clinical exercise scientists, specialists. So they're the ones I think who will be able to deal with somebody who is perhaps in the middle of treatment, has some major side effects of the cancer, for example, lymphedema, has got a stoma bag, has got brain mets. So they do need a lot of care and experience from these very qualified instructors. There's other people that may have finished their cancer treatment, have no major issues, just want to lose a little weight or gain a bit of strength. They really don't need to have that qualification, but what we call cancer confidence, so that they're not afraid to ask a few questions. So I think there's a range of levels that you need out there, and that is where, again, every cancer person is different, and I think instructors have to learn to stay in their lane, but not be afraid to ask questions about what their client likes, doesn't like, how does this feel, is this okay? You know, they will let them know whether it's right or not. But the screening is something that's important to make sure it's safe, and that's one of the main things I try and teach all instructors.
I really like that cancer confidence thing. That's brilliant. I'm gonna borrow that line, I think, Anna. Elaine, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, and I mean, you've taken this to the next level recently, haven't you, with the setting up of a charitable trust to support people with living with cancer, to get access to instructors. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So what happened was CanRehab Limited, which is a training company, we were having phone calls very frequently from people with cancer who'd look up the website, saw cancer exercise, and they thought that we were providing them with programs. So we realized there's a real need to link people who have got cancer, who want to be active, to qualified instructors who can provide them with a safe and effective program. So CanRehab Trust was set up in the middle of the pandemic, because that's when online was an opportunity to match people who were not local, but not geographically, but maybe fitted them as far as what they wanted, what type of exercise they liked, or what kind of activity, what kind of person they wanted to work with, did they have any comorbidities. So CanRehab Trust is in its infancy, but we have latched on with a charity, with a clinical trial called SafeFit, where we actually are now developing the matching and the screening and the delivery of programs or even just a number of sessions for anybody affected by cancer, where the trust will link them with the appropriate instructor. Now, obviously, the main thing we're trying to do now is get funds, because we do think this is something that we would love to provide as a free service to anybody, but we need to get funds to actually calculate how much it would cost so that the instructor gets a decent salary from providing these very safe, individualized programs. So this is one of my main projects, and Elaine's helping with it as well, to try and get this up and running, that we hope will provide a decent way of getting more people with cancer active and doing the activities that they love.
Great, and it's definitely needed, as we know.
Yeah.
So, and we will put up the details around how, if people are interested in supporting it, and information about how they can get in contact with the charity if they're looking for an instructor as well.
And if they want any more information about training, we do training for physios as well, and actually within the NHS for whole groups within a setting that maybe funders want to set up. But really get in touch with us if you get any questions about how to set something up.
Yeah, and we know, and we were talking just a bit before we started this about the CD that Anna and I were involved in producing, that sits behind the Macmillan pack, which allows you to do goal setting and so forth. So we'll put the link in for that one. That CD was produced, it was a few years now, but it's still very, very popular. So particularly, I think, during lockdown, when people were looking for a way to be active and maybe not able to get, well, definitely not being able to get to classes. So there's lots of resources out there that we can signpost people to.
That's brilliant. Well, Anna, thank you so much for taking the time to have a conversation with us today. As you may know, if you want to find any of the links that we've discussed throughout today's conversation, check the comments below this video. And if you're interested to learn more about previous episodes of Network Insights, go to the Move Consulting LinkedIn page. But that's us for today's conversation. So again, Anna and Elaine, thanks for taking part. We'll look forward to seeing you all again soon.